Hello and welcome, everybody. So my name is Steven, and this is the show where we bring together experts to break down some of the most fundamental topics in HR. We have three amazing guests with us today. They're going to be breaking down employer brands and branding. I'm going to go ahead and intro them real quick, and then we'll jump right into our questions. We have with us today Kelly Loudermilk, who is a talent innovator at Build HR. We have Heather Anderson, who is an HR manager at SP Plus, and we have Sarah Hughes with us, who is working in corporate compensation at ADM. So great group here, lots of different perspectives from different angles of the HR world, and they're going to teach us about employer branding. Let's just start with some basic definitions here. Maybe Kelly, you could kind of start us off and share, what is an employer brand?
Well, what is branding in general, right? Personal brand. Employer brand is really your essence out in public, right? It's really what is the organic, feelable, touchable presence of who you are in the corporate world, essentially for all to see. So that can be, your value proposition, that can be your culture, that could be your values, your principles, your mission, your vision, anything and everything. But essentially, it is who you are as a company out in the world to be seen from an employer-employee perspective.
Yeah. I love how you're approaching that. It's almost like it's a feeling that they have about your company. And then there's all these other things that kind of go into that feeling. I want to hear other people's thoughts. So what are employer brands to you? And maybe how are they different than just like a normal company's brand? Sarah, I think
it's hard to follow up that great definition. So, what I had jotted down in my notes is, a condensed version of that, how an audience views, what would it be like to work at that company? Just what feelings do you get when you think of them? Just all around, what is that image this company is broadcasting? Almost like just that billboard of that kind of those feelings.
Yeah. Heather, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. And maybe let's kind of get into some of these more specific elements that make up a brand. Because I know we've already mentioned culture, we mentioned values, employer value proposition, Kelly brought up. What else are kind of some components that fit into this thing that we call an employer brand?
Employer brand. I want to say it's how you feel when you hear the name, how well known the company is. And is that something that is known like just community wide? Like, are you a small company and it's just the locals that know about you? Is it massive like Apple or Nike? Like, you know them. Everyone knows them. And how does it make you feel? Did you have a good experience with them? Is it a bad experience? Would you recommend it to your network of people? Those are all components of a brand, both externally and internally. Like, how do you feel working for that company? How's your everyday experience? Because it could be a phenomenal brand, but if you hate going to work every day, then that brand for you isn't the most pleasing.
Yeah. So I'm starting to get the sense too that it's sort of there's internal and external sort of audiences for this brand, and it sounds like you probably want some alignment between what those two groups are feeling. Let's continue to give some concrete examples. Looks like Sarah maybe has some technical difficulties, but we'll bring her back in. Because Heather, you just brought up Nike and Apple. Kelly, I'm curious to hear from you. What are some employer brands that really stick out to you in your mind? And not just like the big ones, but is there anything in like your hometown, right? Like I'm thinking of the small businesses now where you're just like, man, they have a great employer brand.
So Disney is the one that I always go to first and foremost. They are the masters of employer brand, both internally and externally. They have crafted the playbook of how to navigate those complexities, in my opinion. In terms of a local employer brand, Bonusly is one that's in the Denver, Boulder area. And they're actually also a part of the HR Mavericks and HR advisory group, and quite a few people there with their VP. She's super active. I do think they have a really good employer brand. Gusto is growing their employer brand. It's not as good as Bonusly, but it is something that I know they're also trying to build up in the Denver area. So there's quite a few that are major national companies that they're trying to grow that. One that I grew up with in Oklahoma actually is QuikTrip. And that is a gas station that is taking over the Midwest. And for those who understand who QuikTrip is, they are very nice in what they do and very good in what they do. But their brand has stuck with me as well because they have stayed consistent for 40 plus years in their brand, and it has stayed competitive through all the different market changes. So that has been another local one that has always come to me. But I mean, I will always bow down to the kings at Disney in terms of employer branding.
Absolutely. Those are all great examples. I know one for me locally that I think about sometimes is it's called Gab Wireless.
Yes.
You're probably familiar with them. They're a Utah company.
Oh, okay.
They basically sell phones that are kid safe.
Yep.
And you know, there's lots of ways you could do that, but like their brand is very mission driven. And the
I swear.
CEO is always on LinkedIn giving away phones to single parents, single moms, just doing whatever he can to support other people. I think that goes a long way. It's like the leadership.
Utah one that's a great one as well, Bamboo HR. And Eddie's really good at it too. Eddie's growing their presence, but Bamboo HR is probably one of the best ones that I have seen that come out of Utah specifically. They are phenomenal at what they do.
Yeah.
The funny thing is you see that at a lot of HR companies, they understand how valuable employer brand is. So they invest in it more than maybe others. But sorry, Heather, was something, I think I interrupted you.
No, I was going to kind of reiterate that. Like, I swear, Gab, they must have worked at Disney because, I mean, that man, oh my, he is amazing. And he's always like, he lives his company brand through himself. Like, he just emulates it. And it's insane. Like there have been posts of him just helping like single parents find jobs and things like that, like really utilizing his network for what it's for. And the comments on his posts really reiterate, like, I will be a Gab Wireless customer for the rest of my life. Like, I'm absolutely doing that. Yes, yes, yes. And it just reiterates because of who he is and, you know, the employees that back behind him. It's huge. You know, he hits you in the feels. You know, he's helping save kids. Like, I have cried over some of his posts.
See,
like they are that emotionally charged. Like, I'm a mom, so you know it's scary. And
so
that man's got it on lock.
If you can get your CEO to do that kind of stuff, it draws in employees as well, right?
It does.
Sarah, so I'm sorry, probably some technical difficulties here, but I want to bring you in on kind of our next topic, which is, I think we've already established that like employer brands are good to invest in. But I think specifically there might be some small companies here who are thinking, man, I can't compete with a Disney or an Apple or a Nike for employees. How can I at least do something and stand out? Or should I even try to invest in my employer brand? So kind of this next section is just like the why. What kind of benefits could a small business or one person HR team start to see if they start investing in these kind of activities?
Yeah. So when I think, I live in a small rural community. So I could kind of see, when you see some of the bigger players an hour away where, why would people want to come work at my little small mom and pop shop-esque place versus, a big player. And I guess the main reason you'd still want to invest in that is if you don't try, you're never going to know. And also, there's plenty of people who want to get behind small organizations. They like the feel of it more. So just putting that investment in and the following will happen and they'll come.
Yeah. I think those are great thoughts. Kelly or Heather, anything that you would add just on the benefits that some of these businesses could see if they start investing a little bit more in the way they appear to employees?
It's a huge, huge loss opportunity, no matter what size of company you are, if you don't invest in employer brand. Your employer brand is your business card to gain talent. We are in the most difficult environment than ever before when it comes to talent, especially technical talent. And even though we have a low unemployment rate, we have more positions open than ever, and nobody can fill them because of the complexities that we have. But you are also dealing with a generation that knows their worth and their value, and they want to align with businesses that are that emulate those as well. It's not just about a paycheck anymore. We want those to pay our bills, but we want to feel fulfilled. There's so much more that goes into it, but your employer brand is how you communicate that. So if you want to attract talent, if you want to have people come to your small business, if you want to make an impact in your retention strategy as well, if you don't have some sort of consistent messaging or brand put together to help facilitate how you're going to approach these different types of employee experience topics, you are going to lose your mind, one, because you're not going to have any organization, and two, you're going to miss out on those people who care more than just the bottom line payment. What am I going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis? Who am I going to be working with? What does that collaboration look like? What am I going to feel like at the end of the day? Am I going to feel like I made that impact? And if you don't have those things kind of showcased, you're going to lose out on that talent that is open to more than just a paycheck.
Yeah.
Prime example. When you hear the word airport, what brands do you think of?
JFK.
Okay. Delta, SkyWest.
United, Spirit.
You know,
Southwest is a good one in terms of like
Southwest,
employer brand.
Southwest, I think of.
so there are 35 different companies just here at the Salt Lake Airport. Nobody knows who we are.
Yeah.
They come to the airport because they want to get flight benefits. They want to go work for Delta. They want to go work for SkyWest. They don't know that we're all here.
Uh-huh.
And that's a huge thing. It's like, yeah, I mean, you've got Burger King, you've got, but who are the companies that help staff those? If they don't know that you're here, they don't know your brand, they don't see it, they don't hear about it, how are you going to attract people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, they're going to come over and be like, oh, I want flight benefits. Well, we can do discounts on food. That's not what I want.
Yeah. So it's hyper competitive, it sounds like. You're talking like even in that specific geographic location, it's like 35 different companies fighting.
Oh, yeah.
That could arrive there.
And it's something that we deal with every day, and it's one of the things that I've been constantly pushing is trying to build that employer brand locally. Because my company's very well known out east, but out west, we're not, especially here in Utah, no one knows who we are. We've got some very competitive rates, and we've got some awesome benefits, and our culture here is wonderful. But if they don't know our brand, they've never heard of us, they're going to be like,
Yeah.
They're not even going to look at us.
Yeah.
You got to get out into the community and make sure they know who you are.
Yep.
Yeah, personal example on that. There was a company that I had, I saw they had a job posting, but I was like, an HR job, 10 minutes from my house. I don't know who they are. It's a scam. It's just a door-to-door scam thing.
Yeah.
And then when I actually got an interview, I was like, oh, wow, I had no idea of these opportunities. So even just from hey, I know this is legit, it's good to have an employer.
Yeah. Such a good call out, because I mean, job seekers are just looking through job boards all day, and they see it. They see a title that they could be, and they see the company name they could work for, and hopefully they like one of those, if not both. They don't know the company. Like you said, scamming is big right now, and so that is a risk. Well, let's start to get kind of tactical here. I actually have kind of 3 basic scenarios, and there's 3 of you, so maybe we'll just go down the line. And each of you can kind of take one of these scenarios and share your thoughts, and then you can kind of roundtable it too if anyone else wants to pitch in. But and these kind of scenarios come from the place where it's just everyone is starting somewhere different, each company, and so I want to go through kind of some different maturity levels that your company might be in, and talk about what might be some things that you would do at this stage to help your employer brand. So the first one I have is building the employer brand from scratch. So let's say let's just give you a blank slate. It's a completely new company. You're the first HR person. You have to help the leadership put together this employer brand and start to kind of advertise yourselves. What would be your first moves and strategy on that? Maybe let's give this one to Kelly first. That works.
This is what I always do. I'm always the first one usually. And the easiest way, I'm a huge believer that your brand and your culture have to be organic to the people in it. You cannot define it. It defines itself. You may put messaging to it, but if you do it in the opposite direction, it's not going to bode well for scaling properly and the foundations that come underneath. So what I do normally when you're starting from scratch, especially if you don't have any internal tools to do measuring, Google Forms or Microsoft Forms are going to be your best friend. Start doing NPS scores or eNPS scores internally. Figure out what are some of those gaps, what are some of those wins that you can build upon. Get to know what people feel and how they think about the company. That's going to be your best starting place. And so you can do multiple different types of forms or different types of surveys, and they can vary from one NPS score each year to different types of like, what do you think of their benefits? How would you describe us in one word? Put them in team building exercises, make it more fun and engaging. But that's going to be your best way to start in terms of gathering the data. Take that data, really look at it, see where the consistency are, the patterns are, put that together, start working through some creative wording and some messaging to see what resonates with folks. Go through that testing phase of what resonates with leadership, what doesn't, because what your leadership defines as your brand and what your people define as your brand may not always align. And so your job then, once you have that data and that conversation, is to start making that alignment process go up and down so that it's seamless throughout. And that may vary at different levels, and that's okay, but because you want to have an onion, if you so to speak, where you peel several layers, but it still has to be simple and resonate at the end of the day. And the best way to start it from scratch is gathering that data and letting the people who are currently there tell you how they feel about it, so you know what you can improve upon, where you need to do work, and make sure that it's up to the standards that you want to see for your folks and experience, and what your wins are that you can celebrate and start exploring in different ways for messaging, both internally and externally, when it comes to starting to build out that brand.
Yeah, I love that. I love that insight of just, you have to understand your people. You can't, it's discovered, not created, essentially. That's so interesting. I think you covered that one really well. Let's just move to the next scenario here. And we're going to give this one to Heather. Because Heather, I think you actually started to highlight and kind of share that your experience right now is maybe somewhat similar to this. But let's say you've done all these steps that Kelly just mentioned, and people love working for you. You have the culture, you have the benefits, right? There's kind of an alignment, there's understanding, but no one knows about you. So it's a great brand, but very low brand awareness. So what are some things that a company like that could do? Maybe some things that you're trying right now that are working or not working?
Community involvement. Oh my goodness. And so swag is my love language. I reached out and was like, I was doing my SWOT analysis. I was, looking at our, what our struggles were, having our corporate office help us with recruiting. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Nobody knows we're here. That's why no one's applying, because nobody knows we're here. So how do I get our brand out into the community? How do I do that? So the first things that I started off with was building that social media presence, encouraging my employees to talk about it. Even the employee referrals and such, like, go talk to your marketing departments, or if you're brand new, Canva is awesome. As soon as you know what colors you have, what kind of brand guide that you have created, take that, and talk with your senior leaders, especially if you've got to create one. Make sure that you've got a strong one, because that you will live and die by it. Use that to create your own social media content. Make sure you get it approved before you post. Social media marketing 101. And then just start getting it out there into the community. I wear jackets that have SP Plus on it. I've got, my laptop bag that I take to meetings. I started going out to all the job fairs and just talking to other companies. Anytime we went to any kind of networking event, it's like, well, that's cool. What does your company do? That's nifty. So we're here and this is what we do. And you just start getting that community involvement. The Chamber of Commerce's in your local community are great, but get involved, not just with your target market to help build your business, but also with your target audience for potential employees. Start getting it out there and get people talking about it and recognizing it and seeing your symbols. Share from the company page to help drive like organic views to it.
Mhm.
I'd never even heard of the company I work for now until I applied for them, and it was essential to get it out into the community. And it takes a little bit of time, but it's a full team effort. Everybody should be talking about it. Everybody should be celebrating it. Everybody should be like, oh, have you heard? And
Yeah.
it's going to take some time, especially if you don't have like a huge budget for marketing and things like that, but you can do it. It just
Yeah.
takes a little bit of dedication.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're bringing in employees, you're engaging the community. I think before we move to the third scenario, let's just linger on this a little bit more because we have a topic a little bit later. I think we'll just bring to right now, which is what are some other creative ways that you've seen people advertise their brand? I'll just start out by saying billboards. I've seen a lot of billboards out there, and I didn't get it at first. I thought like they're not advertising a product, but they're just spending money for people to see their brand, and their careers page is linked at the bottom. But what are some of the most creative ways that you guys have seen kind of in this scenario where people have gotten their brand awareness up? Sarah, it sounds like you've got something.
Yeah, so one of my favorite ones recently has been Duolingo on TikTok. So they've got their little owl that will go and just do shenanigans around the corporate office. And I love these videos. They make me laugh. So like that humor and that creativity has made me increase my involvement with Duolingo.
Yeah. That's awesome. And
I
any
think
other? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, thinking is similar to that, right? Thinking outside the box, meeting people where they are. It's marketing 101. In HR, you are a marketer at the end of the day, and you are in sales at the end of the day when it comes to recruiting. Like that is what we do when you really think about it. So meeting people where they are. One of my favorites is always hosting career coaching sessions to a local forum, like especially like what Heather said. If you don't have a budget, it's difficult to really start out, but start doing events on like your TikTok, or start giving out advice for careers, or, hey, we hire entry levels, blah, blah, blah. This is what we tend to ask in our interviews. How would you approach that question? This is what we would recommend for maybe your next interview. Like give people content that helps them. That's going to help build up your brand in general. And that's just personal branding and marketing 101 for like social media. But you have to adopt those types of scrappiness and innovating where you have a persona like Bamboo HR or Duolingo, right? Like they have the panda or the owl. They build that into every little customer interaction, to every little point of their business. And that resonates because that encompasses who they are as a company for both the customer and the employee, but they mean something different for each. And that's where they're really good at doing that and incorporating those fun ideas. But the career fair ones you can do on, LinkedIn Live, like right now, right? Like talk about what kind of things people might encounter. How should they interview? Like this is one of those times where people need that, or coaching them through a difficult conversation or things that they will need in just their overall career. That's one way to meet people where they're at in a way that is unexpected. And it's not for your, betterment. It's for their betterment. But there is always that but. You get all these lists of registered people that are open to new opportunities that could possibly be fits down the road and or currently. So you have to kind of think like that agency recruiter too, where you're just like, how can I build my network? How can I get people ready? How can I start to build up people where I know who to go to for what? And that's like one of the best ways that I've seen that helps really just spread your brand without having to do a lot with budget.
Yeah.
Living your brand, it's like Gab Wireless. He lives his brand. And, especially if you are a smaller company and, like we have a brand new startup out here called Level Next, which is all about mentoring. And our CEO, Lisa Garn, is very well known in the HR world here in Utah, especially, and she lives it every day. You know, if you're a smaller company, every person that has your company's name attached to it will create and contribute to that brand awareness, whether it's good or bad. So it's something to be aware of, that if you're going to promote, if you're going to be active in it, if you're going to have that logo or that mascot or whatever it is attached to you, you better make sure that you're minding your P's and Q's. Are you living the values? Are you showing the community that you back your brand? Because when they think of you, they're going to think of your brand or your company's brand. And what is that going to make them feel like?
Yeah. A couple more thoughts that just came to mind as you guys were talking, and then we can give Sarah the final scenario, which will be very dramatic and interesting. But I think another budget-friendly one is applying for awards. There's so many awards out there, and you'd be surprised how easy it could be. I mean, a lot of them are just, they'll survey your employees, and if your employees like to work there and they say good things, then you'll win an award, and that's good free press. You could also just sharing the story of your brand with journalists and seeing if any of them will pick up, especially if you're a local business. Those are just a couple other thoughts. And Glassdoor reviews, like just encourage employees to review.
You have to be strategic on those though,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
if you canvas that, it's going to be so. Candidates are not as dumb as you think. Like, they are smart, Stephen. They can smell BS from a mile away. So you gotta be like, those are amazing ideas, but be strategic on some of those, especially when you're wanting reviews from folks in a public place, because it has to be genuine. And when it's not, and it's all the timing and everything, it's so noticeable to candidates. Like, it has to be very strategically in how you do that. But it is a good point, because Glassdoor is where we go for reviews.
Now that's a great point. Is we have a small bar here in Salt Lake, and it's like one of the only like kind of goth bars left, and it used to be 18 and older. And so what they would do is at the level where you could be 18, 19, you didn't have to be around the alcohol, they would give you free water bottles if you gave them a 5-star rating on Google.
Yeah.
And there were so many that literally gave 5 stars and said, I only did this so I could get free water. Like, it has its pros and cons, but if for the people that are actually going in and reading it, they're like, okay,
what's going on? Yep.
My basic need of water. It's like, thanks, guys.
So great words of caution there on reviews. Sarah, let's give you the final scenario, and unfortunately, it's much sadder than the other two. So let's say we've conducted all the tests that Kelly has said. We've done the surveys. Everything comes back, and employees really do not like working there. It's a bad place to work. 0 stars. It's a bad brand, and you're having trouble. It's harder than ever to find candidates. You could be in a real bad situation if your brand is suffering this bad. How would you come in as an HR professional and try to turn something like that around?
Yeah. Well, the good news is in this scenario, we know they hate it. So it's digging into all those whys, because, hopefully at this point, you've done all these things, you have the data. Maybe they talk about long hours, 0 flexibility, just like all those scenarios that could play out that way is coming into my mind. Well, that's one of the big things. So work with your leadership team, because there's always, you're the HR person of one, but there's always going to be some other leaders that you're working with that directly impact those employees' day-to-day lives. Work with them, have focus groups, and understand what are solutions to those. So then you can, address those concerns and issues where you can and rebuild that brand. And then it's such a great feel-good story. You think of all the different companies that, had culture problems and then really turned it around. And how great of a feel-good is that? That's something that employees can get behind. Someone who's then looking in the future, you do all the work. A year later, 2 years later, now the new people entering the job market see, wow, they listened, they turned that around. So I think that's very powerful in itself.
Yeah.
I actually had to do this for a company. Their eNPS score when I first came in was -11.
Oof.
And so it was
And Kelly,
shocking.
could you just share real quick, what is an eNPS score for
That
those?
is an employee net promoter score. So a lot of small businesses know what a net promoter score is. And that is like how, if I asked you the question, Stephen, would you recommend my business to someone, a friend or a colleague? And you click or a 9 or a 10, that means you are on board. You are somebody who is a positive impact. And so my NPS score will be positive. If you are a detractor and you're like 4 or below, or I think it's 5 and below, you start to impact it negatively and it takes time. Like my number goes down. Those in the middle between 6 and 8 are neutral, meaning that doesn't really impact me one way or the other. So you have your positives and your detractors. You do that same mechanism to get the instant feel or a number of the instant feel for your customers as well as your employees. And that's why it's called an eNPS score. I also like to take it a step further for your NPS score for your manager specifically, because that's usually where a lot of the troubles start. But anyways, my client, when I did this with them, -11, I was floored. And I was like, what am I going to do? Because this was the first time I was working on employer branding, and this was years ago. And similar to what Sarah said, you have to start with the leadership team, but they are so detached, even in small companies. It's not something that they're aware of the front line and what they're experiencing and vice versa. And this company was under 50 people. So I was really surprised by that. And I actually created a hackathon mechanism where we brought people in and gathered their feedback on what is broken. What is causing this system to not be positive? What is the gaps that are outside of just the benefits? Because they had the benefits and they had the vacation time. They had all of that, but it was still -11. And so we got down to the nitty gritty of it. And then we started working through the processing of figuring out how to fix that with like a Lean Six Sigma type of project management. And what happened was the top management and C-suite was so disconnected from their frontline workers. They were going on opposite highways at all different types of levels. That whole process brought the alignment down to where they were walking hand in hand down the sidewalk, essentially to the point where not even 6 months later, we did it again and it went to 56. So It was a huge drastic difference, but it was truly just that like there was no internal alignment and everyone was a million miles an hour in every which way. And I was just surprised. So like what Sarah said, getting your leadership involved helps, but you have to have a plan of attack on the tactical level of how to start getting them involved. And I found that hackathons help to break down the communication barriers without feeling defensive, because it's like we're in this together versus like, hey, your employees hate you versus like, because that can feel that way, because when you're a business owner, that's your baby, and that's hard to take. Like Heather's a mom, I'm a mom. Sarah, I see some photos in the back of paintings. Are you also a mom?
I'm not, but I have pets, so they count.
So they count. They're the best kind of kids because they don't talk back all the time. So Heather knows.
Unless you have a husky.
Oh,
he talks back all the time.
It's just shush husky. No, I'm just kidding. But just to kind of like showcase that when it's your baby, you get super defensive, and you have to approach it in a way with leadership that levels them down to feel less defensive. And I found that hackathons help to break that ground in an even level. But that, when you mentioned that, and then Sarah was talking about it, I was like, man, I've been there and it is not easy, but you just keep trucking and you'll get to some result at some point.
That's probably, I feel like, one of the hardest things to do is no one likes to deliver bad news, especially when it's something that they're so invested in, because you don't know where their exhaustion level is, because they put so much into it and the burnout is real. And being an entrepreneur, being a new business owner is not easy. It is so hard. So you want to make sure that you're still being aware of the fact that they might just be completely exhausted. And so be careful with how you phrase that, because I think that would be probably the hardest thing, to have to go in and be like, hey, so I know you're like murdering yourself to get this up and running. They hate you, like this is not good. Be careful with your phrasing. Go in there with suggestions, and really make sure that you're being mindful of their feelings, because you want them to be receptive to help turn it around. and especially with a culture change, it can sometimes feel like having to turn around an airplane in a swimming pool.
Yeah.
And, you don't have a whole lot of people to help you, but it can be done.
Yeah.
But it takes time. It takes, effort. It takes the right phrasing, and it's not going to be instant.
Yeah.
I would say, Heather, remember that as well for all of us as practitioners, right? Because we internalize so much and we put so much on our shoulders that we have to remember to not take things personally, especially if there's something that we have impact to make change on, but we're not given that authority or we don't have the ability to navigate that yet, right? And I see that so often with especially people who are ad hoc HR or who are new to HR. They internalize it so much because they want to help. That's why we're in the business that we're in. And you have to remember Heather's words exactly to say, it's okay that I'm not in this place of accepting this right now, or it's okay that I'm not okay with this, but don't internalize it because it's not just about against you, right? Even though it's it's your job. It's just one of those things that you haven't had a chance to work on yet and that you're going to work on.
It's an opportunity.
There you go.
Exactly.
It's like Stephen R. Covey says, nothing fails like success. You're going to succeed and then it's going to change and then it's going to fail. And you have an opportunity to succeed again. And you've already succeeded once. So you got this. Just be nice to us when we tell you what you need your help with.
And let's continue the conversation around what does success actually look like when it comes to an employer brand. We brought up ENPS and really explained that metric. Amazing that you could see that big of a change in 6 months, right? So there obviously is hope, but what other metrics or things would you expect to see change? Maybe it's even anecdotally, it doesn't have to be a metric, but what things would you like to see that would make you think, oh, our employer branding initiatives are successful? And hopefully these are things, by the way, that you can take back to leadership and show them as well and point it out. But let's start to kind of list some of these things out. And Sarah, maybe you could kick us off at the beginning of this.
Yeah, going back to, wearing my recruiter hat from a past life, one of the things that helped indicate for us that things were succeeding was there was a substantial jump in applications. You could just start to see as we increased our community involvement, our advertising, bringing up the warm fuzzies our employees got from working with us. You could just see a huge jump. And then, you'll see after certain events, you'll see a big spike, but then it's that continued steady growth. That's the sign of long-term success, because not everything's overnight.
Yeah, great example. Heather or Kelly, what other things would you like to look for as measures of success for brand?
I'll let Heather go first, and then I'll end my thoughts.
I think for us, it's been the employee engagement, the excitement from the team to know that, they love working here. They really are feeling it and they talk about it outside of work, which is huge. You want your employees and your retention rates to be solid, because you're never going to be able to out recruit retention. You've got awesome people there. Make sure that they're, that they feel it. They feel it. And especially when you're making those moves, it's going to be small, but celebrate the small wins and show your appreciation for those, because that will in turn help keep that wheel going.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, when I have to go back to business for my CEOs, they only care about metrics, unfortunately, because they're looking at the bottom line, and it sucks because I love the engagement, but it's hard to measure that when you're not looking at exact productivity. And so for me, what I use is my referrals. My referrals go up consistently, and they are some of the better hires. My like Sarah was saying, my applications are consistently more. My time to hire is shorter because I have more people who are interested. My dropout rates are lower because I'm not having people drop out at different parts of the interview process because they have other offers. My acceptance ratios are higher because even though I have someone with 3 offers, they are actually going to accept our offer because they resonate more and they provide that context. So there are a lot of different ways to actually show a real return on investment for your leadership team. And some business owners, when they are trying to grow, that's all they're looking at is the finances. And so being able to showcase that, but it really isn't your recruiting metrics, your time to hires, your referral rates, your success hire rates, your acceptance rates, your ability to showcase their onboarding and up ramps with their manager rates, those types of measurements. And then even like what Heather was saying, the retention is huge, because if you can retain people for more than 2 years at this point in time, that is huge. People think that that's not like not a long time. But in today's world, when every research shows you have to leave a job every year to 2 years just to get enough pay to maintain your status of living with the, inflation, that tells me if I can keep someone for 2 years, I've done my job, because that's the new norm. And not a lot of older generations understand that. They're thinking 5 to 10 years, but that's what we're going to see more of. So if you can retain people for more than 2 to 3 years, you have absolutely done your job in terms of your return on investment there.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point to put too, is especially if you are new to HR, you may not know a whole lot about what that data means or how to get it. What HR analytics you need to be looking for to help produce that, because Kelly's right. The C-suite talks in numbers. They give, and like all of their focus is all about, is my business successful? Is it growing? Is it, producing what I want it to produce? And are we going to be able to sustain long term? Because obviously they're not in it just for 1 or 2 years and then they're done. So, especially as a new HR person, I would strongly recommend looking into and understanding what those metrics are. What can you do to get them? How do you calculate them? I think that Eddie's doing a whole bunch of stuff now. Aren't the Mavericks doing things like that to help kind of,
Yeah.
gain that? So check
Yeah.
those out, or even reach out and talk to, strong HR analytic professionals to have them help break it down, because they can be really confusing sometimes. But once you understand them and you can speak it, then that will just help you bring more to the table, and it helps your position as well, because you really know what it is you're looking for, and you can help be that much more of a value and that much more of a problem solver to your C-suite.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I think we covered that success piece really well. And I love how each of you highlighted different metrics across the entire employee life cycle, right? So obviously brand is a big deal. It can affect everything from acquisition to retention to, I'm sure it affects beyond, right? When they move on to the next job. Referrals, like you said, Kelly, maybe they'll come back and refer people. That was kind of our last major topic together, but we always like to give everybody one last chance to share anything that maybe we forgot about or anything that you'd like to reemphasize. So kind of our last question in all these conversations is, in a sentence or two, what is your final piece of advice for somebody who's working on an employer brand right now? And Heather, we'll actually throw it back to you to start, and then we'll go to Sarah and we'll let Kelly close us off.
I would say coming in as a new HR person, the first thing you want to do is you want to understand your employer's brand. Make sure you understand it, because nothing else is going to work unless you understand what it is that you're doing.
Sarah, over to you.
I would make sure to get buy-in on why it's important, because there are plenty of companies that their product may be wonderful and I would love their product, but I've understand their employer brand to not be. And if I can't get behind that, like it was said earlier, I'm a millennial. If I can't get behind that, I don't want your product. So it is very important.
Yeah. Kelly,
I think no pressure, right? I think echoing Sarah and Heather's points is extremely important, but I also think it's one of those things where employer brand is something that is new to the ecosystem of people. And you have to really be comfortable with the unknown and how to navigate that, especially when you're new to it. So be open to learning, be open to investigating, be open to the feedback that you're going to get, both good and bad. And at the end of the day, your employer brand is going to be different in so many different ways. You have your consumer brand that is very anonymous and kind of tied to employer brand in a lot of companies. But in smaller companies, that's not going to be the same thing. And you cannot tie yourself to that boat. You have to understand your external employer brand. You have to understand your internal employer brand, which is internal communications. Those are similar, but very different as well. There's a lot of layers to this whole ecosystem of employer brand. Be open to investigating those and learning about them, because they are going to not make a lot of sense if you don't understand some of those basics. Talk to marketing professionals. They are phenomenal at this. Your personas, that actually plays a lot into recruiting with your employer brand. Like, there are so many different things that you can absorb from other areas of your business that can help you support your learning process. And I think that that's really big. It's just be open, be absorbing, observant. What do you like about one brand? What do you not like about the other? Have fun with it. Like, it's fun. My favorite hire is just from a random comment on LinkedIn. I tracked her down. I put her in the process, and we got her hired, and she was with us for 5 years. Like, that was all from an employer brand because she knew us from her other business. Like, have fun with it. It's supposed to be fun. And I think that's the biggest message I would give.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I think we've all learned a lot, and hopefully those listening as well. If you want to learn a little bit more and get some reading, we have an encyclopedia entry on employer brands as well. This video will be posted at the top of the article. We'll continue to edit this article over time and make it more and more valuable to you guys. And most of all, connect with these three on LinkedIn. They're awesome. They know what they're talking about. We always learn something new when we hop on these conversations together. And they're just really helpful, nice people. So I'm sure if you message them, they won't be weird about it. They'll probably help you out.
I want pictures, Heather, of your husky.
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just weird in general, but I work at a haunted house, so.
Oh, love that.
It's time for Halloween. I'm so excited. I'm ready to decorate massively.
We've already been open all month, so.
I need dog pictures. I need animal if you're gonna connect with me, I need animal pictures ASAP.
Share the personal brands.
There you go. Huskies need personal brands.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. They have personal brands.
Well, thank you, Free, so much for being on this call, and thank you for everyone who's listening or watching after the fact. We hope everyone has an amazing rest of their week. See you around.
See ya.